So the title is a bit of a clickbait title. It's Kaun, Banega, Crorepati, finding bugs. For, I guess, everyone in India is probably aware of the game show, Kaun, Banega, Crorepati. But for anyone who is not familiar with the Indian context, this is a game show, much like the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in the West, in the US. So crore in the Indian context is 10 million rupees, right? And I guess based on the conversion rates, 1 crore rupees is something like between 125 to 150,000 USD. So that's the title of the stock. So this is a graph from there's a chart from DeFi Llama, and this keeps changing, but not as much. So this essentially, if you can see this shows the total value hacked, right? So it's about $9 billion, and it shows a bar chart across the last 7 or 8 years. I don't know how accurate the data is from before 2020, but at least in the last 4 years, this has been pretty consistent. So the bars are. So for every year, this shows the amount that was hacked, right? And as you can clearly see, for those who are in security, this is not very surprising. But for those who are not in security, in Web3 security, who are in Web2 security, this is really billions, right? B as in billions as in B. So $9 billion hacked across, right, over the last since we start, since DeFi Llama started tracking this, and out of that, there's a split here, around 6 billion in DeFi and about 3 billion in bridges. So the tallest bars that you see in 2021, between 21 to 23, those are the bridge hacks. And I believe the biggest one was about $600 million, right? So clearly, and these were exploits, right, on chain. So clearly the black hats are becoming Crorepatis, right? Many times over, whoever they are, wherever they are. So that's not a good sign, right? So what have the security guys started doing? If you've heard of bug bounties, then Web2 bug bounties have been around for a while. Web3 bug bounties, there are many of them now, but Immunify is one of the first ones in this space. So they have Web3 bug bounties, and as you can see here. So this is the leaderboard, right, as of, I think, yesterday. The white hats, so these are the white hats who register on Immunify, and any protocol that has signed up with Immunify is listed over there, has bounties. So white hats go there, find bugs for protocols that are on-chain, right, so before the black hats can get in, and they find bugs in production, right? So it's not just the black hats, but the white hats have become Crorepatis as well. So this is the leaderboard, right? So if you see, the top 5 have made anywhere from $3 million to $14 million, right? And some of them have made $2 to $5 million per bug reported, right? Which, for those coming from the Web2 space, this is crazy, right? So even like the 0 days in Apple OS, in iOS platforms or Android, go for between $1 to $10 million. So in that range, so Web3 is already there, and I believe we are just getting started, right? So that's good news for security. So we have white hats who are making a lot of money, right? Obviously finding bugs that are critical, that would have resulted in losses that are 10, 50, 100 times multiples of these. Who else, right? I mean, these the white hats it may seem like really edge cases where people find $2 to $5 or $10 million on live protocols. right? And those are really awarded for the critical bugs, which can lead to a loss of the entire TVL or a loss or lock of entire TVLs, right? So that is hard, but there is still a lot of opportunity in the Web3 space for people who are security researchers, right? Who may not be really good or lucky at getting these big bug bounties, but they can really focus on what are known as security reviews or audits. It used to be, I mean, the space moves really fast. Like 3 years or 4 years ago, there weren't so many opportunities, right? And we did have quite a few of the security projects or companies that would do these audits, but for a random person sitting in any part of the world, it would be very hard to sort of be part of these companies or projects and be able to do these, get an opportunity to audit. So I think it was around 4 years ago that Code Arena really pioneered this concept of audit contests, right? So it was completely open; anyone could really join. And what it did was, instead of audits being done by 2 or 3 people, teams within these big companies, they said, hey, essentially the protocol will come onto this platform, Code Arena platform, and anyone can really find a bug. And they had this very smart idea of really rewarding the unique bugs, and if there were duplicates, then you would get, the multiple would reduce, right? So that's the way that they handled duplicate submissions for bugs on that are found and reported on by multiple people. So if you look at the leaderboard, so this is an all-time leaderboard for Code Arena. So if you look at the top 5 again, so they have become Crorepattis, right? So the top competitor on this leaderboard has clearly made more than $1 million, and this is over the last 3 or 4 years, for whatever duration they participated in. So that is great, right? And this was 4 years ago, right? That Code Arena started, and since then, the number of platforms for audit contests have increased. There are at least between, I think, 5 to 10 that I'm aware of. So we have Code Arena, we have Cantina from Spearbet, we have Sherlock, we have Codehawks, we have Hats, we have Immunify. So a whole bunch of these companies have launched these audit contest platforms, which really makes it very easy and convenient for people sitting anywhere in the world to go, and it doesn't have to be these critical bugs. I mean, you're looking at these protocols that have not been launched yet, so they're still being audited, and you get paid even for reporting low bug, medium severity bug, and maybe and sometimes even optimizations, informational findings, and so on, right? So it's obviously become very competitive. So there is a lot of opportunity. So that is sort of the clickbait part of this talk, but this is really supposed to be a workshop. So the goal here was to really motivate people to get on these leaderboards, right? To become Crorepattis. I mean, that is sort of the stretch goal, but at least start getting into this space. We need a lot more people into this space, and there has been, I think about 4 years ago, there were maybe 100 people. I mean, the first contest in Code Arena was 10 people, and now every contest has has hundreds, right? Between 200 to 1,000 people contesting, depending on the size of the pot and so on. So we need a lot more people. So for any of you watching this, the question can be, well, okay, how do I get onto this leaderboard? How do I become a Crorepati? Where do I get started, right? So the next part of the meat of the workshop is a workshop that we conducted at DevCon, recently held DevCon last month in Bangkok, and also at the DeFi Security Summit. So this can be both for people who want to get into Web3 security, as well as developers themselves, so that they can prevent these bugs from getting in. But the focus, I'm going to be mostly stressing on the security researcher part. So the first idea as a security researcher, right, when you look at a project, right, it can be for a bug bounty, it can be for an audit, it can be for a contest or it can be for anything else, is to is to really not start digging deep, but to think at a high level and to assess, okay, what is this protocol doing, right? What are the assets that are part of this protocol, right? What kinds of ERC tokens is it handling? What kind of, is it handling native ETH? Or it could be, I'm going to focus obviously on the Ethereum part because it's ETHIndia. So depending on the blockchain, you have to focus on the assets, right? Because without assets, there's nothing interesting for the attacker to steal, really. And then the next question is actors, right? So these are the people, these are the entities that interact with the protocol. Who are these actors, right? Who are the users who will be interacting with the protocol? And obviously the question is, okay, if they have to interact, what are those actions, right? What are the actions? Are they depositing funds? What is the path out of the protocol for these funds? When is it allowed? When is it not allowed? What is the right way? What did the protocol really want these actors to do, right? The good actors to do, and what shouldn't the bad actors be doing? So that should really be the focus of the initial assessment. And the second one, which is really critical, is to look at the behavior, right? What is the expected behavior for a protocol? And from a security perspective, that is not enough, right? From a security perspective, you're really looking at the unexpected behaviors. The expected behaviors are the happy paths that the protocol hopefully makes sure it happens, validates it, has a good test suite, and so on. But it's really the unexpected ones, right? That have not been tested, that have not been thought about. So that is really what the security researchers should be looking into, right? And the developers, the protocol may imagine that the set of actors, the good actors, are going to behave really well, but the reality is going to be very different, right? And this is not just true from a protocol perspective when they're thinking about their users, right? But it's also true for the security researchers when you're thinking about the protocol developers themselves, right? I may think that the protocol development team is fantastic. They've really, thought about this really well. There was a spec, there are documentation, they designed it well, they validated well, everything is well tested, and when they come for a contest or for an audit, it's really sort of bulletproof, and that I won't be able to find something, but the reality is very different, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have had those billion-dollar bounties or the criticals that are found over and over again, the highs and mediums in these contests, right? So the reality is that for a variety of reasons, the developers, the protocols are not launch ready from a security perspective, right? So there are market reasons, there are skill reasons, various reasons, right? So from that perspective, the security researcher really has to think about, okay, what happens normally and what is an anomaly, right? An anomaly is something that is not expected to happen at least from the perspective of the protocol or the developers or the researchers themselves, right? Now, not all anomalies are unexpected things, right? So not all anomalies are really bugs, right? I mean, it could be a crash. In the case of smart contracts, you could have reverts, you could have a case where there is somebody, maybe launches like a griefing attack where they really don't end up with a lot of funds, but they essentially make life miserable for the other users. They may steal the fees. I mean, there are a whole bunch of these anomalies which are not really critical or high severity bugs that have the highest impact from the protocol perspective, right? And even there, not all bugs are really vulnerabilities, right? Because there will be trust assumptions, there will be threat models that you'll have to consider. So if you put that in perspective, what I may think of as a bug is really within the threat model, right? Or is outside the threat model, or is within the trust model of the protocol. So that's something. And this is, I mean, if there was to be one tip, then the key is to challenge the assumptions, right? I mean, assumptions are really the root of all bugs. The assumptions that the developer makes about the platform, about the other developers, about the blockchain, about the users, right? All these assumptions are sort of built in. They may expect that the users will do, you know, 1, 2, 3, some sequence of actions, but they may do 1, 3, 2, right? They may expect that, hey, the inputs will be sanitized, will be logical, will be things that they've seen before, but obviously we are talking about the blockchain world, right? We're really talking about Byzantine environment, and if you go look at that, you really can't trust anything, right? So if you're into security of blockchains, then everything is part of your threat model, right? The blockchain itself can get reorged. There could be dependency bugs. I mean, the list goes on and on. So that is, assumptions are really the root of all bugs. So as a security researcher, I mean, this meme is really tongue-in-cheek, but you know, question everything, right? And in this case, you're really questioning the protocol devs themselves, right? As a security researcher, I'm like, okay, this was done. Why was it done this way? Who is supposed to do this? Why is it not done the other way? Now, will you get an answer or not depends on the way, I mean, depends on the platform. You know, if it is a bug bounty, it's much harder. If it is, if it's an audit contest, then again, it's much harder because of the scale. There's a lot of noise, there's a lot of spam. But if it is a collaborative audit that you know that you're a part of, and if the protocol is paying a lot of money, I mean, these audits cost a lot, right? Depending on the quality, of course. So they will answer. You know, the expectation is that they will answer most of everything, and if they don't, then you make assumptions. We'll talk more about it. All right. So the next one is to discover the misuse scenarios, right? So, I mean, these are, again, very high-level things. I don't want to get into the Solidity part. There are some fantastic resources. One of the great ones right now is Rare Skills. Shout out to them. Jeffrey, standing at the back, they have a booth, so go talk to them. I think they have the best resources today on some of the most complex topics in this space, right? So, take a look at that, but these are really sort of at a 100,000-foot level. And this is something that we miss out, right? When you go into the weeds, we need to sort of zoom out and think about, okay, this is great, this is how they expect it to be used, but what are the misuse scenarios here, right? And then misuse is not enough. You have to consider really the abuse scenarios. And that's what the attacker is going to do, right? And that's where your concept of attack surface comes in. So if you don't know what an attack surface is, it's really everything that is available to the attacker to be able to poke holes at, right? And in this case, in the case of the blockchain environment, you know, compared to Web 2, if people have been working in the Web 2 space, this is not sitting and sort of sending random packets or pings to a black box that is behind you know, behind a network with the firewalls and whatnot. I mean, that is sort of the Web 2 world, and even that gets hacked quite a bit, right? We're talking about the blockchain space where everything is, you know, is available. The source code is typically verified. You can look at the source code. You can look at all the actions that have happened. You go to any of the block explorers, you can see all the transactions. You can see hacks happening in real time, right? I mean, this is the level of visibility that you have in this space. So that is really your attack surface, right? I mean, that is at a high level, but then if you look at a protocol, all the interactions, all the code bases, all your external public functions that really let anyone interact with. I mean, nobody really needs an API key to interact with the smart contract, right, in general. So the attack surface is huge in this space. Great. So you looked at this, you found, okay, you figured out that, okay, I can look at these misuse models, abuse models, attack surface, you found something. Now that looks like a bug or a vulnerability. The next question is, okay, figuring out, okay, what is the impact? What is the severity of this, right? And in general, so this is something we've been doing since Web 2. Severity is really measured as, you know, there's a matrix, you have an impact and a likelihood. You see what the impact is. Is it high, medium, low? And then likelihood is high, medium, low, and then you figure out, right? So something that has high impact And by impact, we mean loss of funds, right? Lock of funds or denial of service. So you put in money and then the users can't take it out. That is something serious as well. And then the impact may be permanent or it could be temporary, right? Um, and then the impact could apply to all possible states within the protocol, or it could be to a few possible state, and the state could be assets, it could apply to all the assets, or some particular subset of assets, it could apply to all the users or some users, all the pools, some pools, depending on the protocol, there are many ways that you can look at it, right? So that is the impact we are talking about. And that is good, but then, and that is typically objective, right? You can assess the impact, and protocols generally cannot deny because you can show it, you can argue, you can write a POC, do all these things. But where it gets tricky is the likelihood, right? What is the probability that this vulnerability with this impact can be exploited, right? So that is tricky, and that is generally if you can show that it can always be done, right? There are no checks and measures that prevent this, or there are no conditions that are required either within the protocol or external to the protocol, then the likelihood is really high, right? And if it is conditional, there could be certain conditions that are required, then it sort of becomes a bunch of conditionals, right? So the likelihood goes down if you require the user to be whitelisted, or if you require the asset to be whitelisted, or if you require the user to have certain number of funds, or there are many other scenarios like that. So that is tricky, but that is also part of the puzzle, right? The key, however, stepping back, is really to find inconsistencies, right, in the protocol. So when you're looking at the code, obviously there are a whole bunch of checks within the protocol that make sure that the funds that are being withdrawn belong to the user who deposited, or things like that. And there could be these conditionals implemented as modifiers typically, or just your conditionals in Solidity. And they could be inconsistent, right? So when you start looking at the code, one of the patterns that comes up is you see certain checks in certain flows or certain parts of the code base, but then you don't see them in other parts, right? So that is a red flag. So then the question is, okay, is that really missing? Is it meant to be there, or are there good reasons for it to be missing, right? So those checks, inconsistent checks will lead to bad transitions, and that will lead to bad state, right? So the whole protocol is obviously a state transition diagram from a computer science perspective. So that is really what you're looking into, right? So from a protocol developer's perspective, either the checks are there or they're not there, right? So do or do not, there's no trying, right? And if it is not there, then there should be really a good reason for that. All right. The next one is, what does it take to find these bugs? Yeah, and this may be an impression. So the bug that you see, so this is sort of retrofitting a Web 2 meme to a Web 3 meme, and this sort of what looks like a Jenga or a set of stones is really meant to imply that there is a very small dependency that is somewhere at the bottom. It's being held. The whole house of cards, right, is being held by this tiny tile, and if something happens to it, right, or if nobody takes care of it, or if there's there's a bug in it, then all these dependencies, right, everything on top is really messed up, right? And this really became popular a few years ago when there was a bug that was found in OpenSSL, which really is the one of the key security layers of the internet as we know, right? So that's a Web 2 space, and this is really talking about dependencies. Now in the Web 3 space, this really gets multiplied several times over, right? And what I mean by that is that there are really bugs all over the place, right? And that has got to do with the maturity of this space. Things have obviously, I'm pretty optimistic. Things have gotten much better in the last 6 to 8 years that I've been in the space. earlier there were bugs everywhere. It was much easier to find bugs, but now it has gotten, I mean, the bar is much higher, right? But still, it is much early compared to hopefully, where we'll be 5 or 10 years from now, where the number of bugs won't be these many. So the point here is that when you're looking at a code base, right, every line matters, right? And the amount of dollars that that are secured by every line is, if you go to a Web 2 person who who doesn't have a clue about the crypto or the Web 3 space, they won't believe this, right? So if you look at the deposit contract of Ethereum, or if you look at a couple of other contracts, right? Maybe Uniswap, or a couple of others, then the number of dollars that are at stake for every line in their code base is really, really high, right? And this could also apply to Open Zeppelin libraries, for example. So every line matters. It's not, I mean, this is really tough, right? It's not just the lines, you have to read between the lines as well. And between the lines here really means the assumptions that are in the head of the developer and that are not captured, right? It's easy to find bugs in things that you see, but a lot of the bugs are in things that have not been considered, that have not been codified. And then you also have to read beyond the lines, right? And by this, what I mean is that you have to consider dependencies as well, right? So you see that the scope for your review is maybe a couple of contracts, but then you're assuming some dependencies on the underlying blockchain, the libraries, and a whole bunch of other things, right? And even Web 2 dependencies. I mean, there was a nasty bug reported a few days ago in one of the other ecosystems. So that is that. And for people in this space, you keep hearing this a lot, that you need to have a hacker mentality. This is a different kind of a hacker, not the hackers here at the ETHIndia workshop, at the conference, at the hackathon. But this is the attacker mindset, right? And by this, what is meant is that you need to not just see what's there, but what's missing, right? And insecurity really lies in the places that are the darkest, where there's not much of light, which have not been tested. People don't think too much about it. That's where the bugs lurk. So you really have to think like an attacker. But obviously, you need to act like a white hat, and by this, we mean that, hey, there are really big repercussions for black hats, right? And bugs are everywhere, really. So if you look at any of the audit contests, you do see that there are quite a few reported, and even for really mature protocols that have gone through multiple audits, there are still ones that are reported. There haven't been so many recently, but quite a few in the past. So how do you start doing that, right? So there's a concept called invariance in computer security, but more specifically in formal verification. So these are properties that are meant to be held by the protocol or by the program across the board. And these properties could be something for an ERC20, it could be something as simple as the balances of all the token holders should obviously be, should not be more than the total balance of that token itself, right? So that's a hello world kind of a invariant. So where do you find these invariants? You try to read the spec if there is one. Unfortunately, only the most mature protocols have specifications these days, and these are not even a specification in one of the formal verification languages, right? I mean, I'm talking about English specifications, where there is, I mean, things like you would find for the beacon chain, Ethereum beacon chain, for example, or for any of the layer 2s, mature layer 2s, for example, right? So if you look at their documentation, it is really a spec. Every bit, every byte, every transition is laid out, right? So if there is one, then it's fantastic. That's very lucky. But typically, there are documents. There's some documentation on the protocol GitHub. That is really where you infer it. And sometimes there is just inline comments within the code base itself. So that's what you look at, right? And where you don't, going back to challenging assumptions, if you don't see something laid out as an invariant that you think should be there, then ask. right? I mean, this is something that we see repeatedly is during the review process, we don't ask enough, right? We assume that the developers, we assume the assumptions made by the developers, and we assume that they should hold, and that's where a lot of the bugs lurk and are missed. So we should be asking them, challenge every assumption of the developers of the protocol. And if that doesn't work for whatever reason, then there's a concept called inferring invariance, right? And this goes back to the example I said, is if the checks are in most of the places, but they're missing in a few, then you know that, okay, either it's missing for a good reason, or that is an invariant, at least that should have been an invariant that you can infer, and it's really missing here. So this, surprisingly, right, in my experience, brings out a lot of bugs, right? So that is, and these are really clues that you can find in the code base. So that is what you do. So the final meme is really that, hey, I mean, this is something the security researchers in this space keep getting asked for people, you know, who are getting in this space. Everyone wants the next big or the most, you know, the fastest roadmap to becoming a Crorepati, right? What are the tools I should be using? Should I know this? Should I be a developer? Should I have done this? Should I look at Solidity or should I focus on something else? What techniques do I use, right? And what are the tips? I mean, this is, so this last step really goes against all the tips that I'm sharing is really, I really don't believe any of this is necessary or sufficient, right? What the one skill that we need is to be able to read code, right? And I would stress on the reading part. So for devs, it is all about writing code. For security researchers, it's all about reading code. And reading code, I mean, it can be manual. You can take tools to, you know, static analysis tools, formal verification. But you're really looking at the code and trying to understand what is this supposed to do, right? What did the programmers, what did the developers want this protocol to do, and more importantly, not to do, right? So that is critical, and yeah, I mean, there is really no bug-free code. So it's all about reading the code and finding the bugs, and it may seem like if you look at any of the leaderboards, right? You may seem, I mean, or on crypto Twitter, it may seem like there's a person who comes and then, you know, within 3 months, I mean, they're posting all these statistics that, hey, I made tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in 1 year, and next year I'm going to 3x it or 10x it, whatever, right? So that's really the tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, assuming that they are genuine, there is a lot of preparation that they've done, right? And this could work differently for different people, right? Should you really be a developer? Honestly, the answer is no. I'm not a developer, right? I've never been a developer, right? And I've been doing security research for a long time now. So you don't need to be a developer. There are many examples of people who have come in from totally other domains, right? Not computer science, not computing. People have come in, right? They have just prepared themselves. There's enough. Everything is happening in the open, right? You have all these audit contests. You have all these protocols, all the source code. There is more than enough of roadmaps and tools and techniques, right? It's really about applying those. It's really about practicing. And then most importantly, it's really about patience, right? Have the patience. Try to do it, see what is working. Contests are fantastic. If that doesn't happen, reevaluate. And I wouldn't say that, you know, maybe maybe everyone can do it, but maybe there are cases where, you know, maybe this is not not part of your skill set or not something that you're cut out for. So that can happen as well. So just test it out and take it from there. So that's it from me. Happy to chat later. I'll be around tomorrow as well. Thank you.